Hello everyone, welcome back. This is the third part of What If Naruto Was Reincarnation of Sun Wukong? Huge shout out to 𝐫𝐲1818 for this awesome story. Let's begin.
Naruto and Kabuto arrived at Orochimaru's main hideout in the Sound Village. Kabuto began his task, gathering the Sound Ninja and the numerous test subjects, many of whom had been kept in cells or tubes for unspeakable experiments. The subjects, wary of Kabuto's intentions, hesitated at first, but Kabuto's silver tongue quickly persuaded them, leading them all to the vast arena deep within the hideout. The arena was filled with tension, a mix of resentment, fear, and confusion radiating from the crowd. Kabuto stood at the center, his gaze sharp as he addressed them all. "Orochimaru is dead," Kabuto announced, his voice steady, yet carrying an undercurrent of finality that sent a shockwave through the crowd. The response was immediate. The test subjects, finally freed from their tormentor's grasp, erupted into cheers. Some grinned with savage glee, while others looked on with disbelief. Suigetsu's wild grin spread across his face, his sharp teeth glinting as thoughts of freedom and vengeance danced through his mind. Orochimaru's dead. His mind raced to his goal, obtaining the legendary 7 swords of the Hidden Mist. Kimimaro, however, stood paralyzed with shock. His lord, the one he had devoted his life to, was gone. His disbelief slowly turned into rage as his hands clenched into fists. Nearby, Sakon, Tayuya, Jirobo, and Kidamaru exchanged uneasy glances, their emotions conflicted. Tayuya broke the silence among them. "So that's why the mark disappeared," she muttered, her eyes narrowing in realization. After Orochimaru's death, the cursed marks that had once bound them to him had vanished. Suddenly, Kimimaro's voice boomed across the arena, his fury spilling over. "Silence," he shouted, his rage directed at the celebrating test subjects. The air grew thick with tension as he turned his burning gaze toward Kabuto, demanding answers. Who killed Lord Orochimaru? It was not Kabuto who answered, but Naruto, standing calmly beside him. "I did," Naruto said, his voice unyielding and steady. A deadly silence followed, broken only by the sound of Kimimaro's breath growing heavier with every passing second. His bloodlust surged, filling the arena like a tangible force. His once cold eyes now burned with the fire of vengeance. "I will kill you," Kimimaro growled, his words dripping with venom. Naruto let out a soft sigh, his shoulders briefly relaxing. "I didn't come here to fight," he said almost regretfully. But then, as if a switch had flipped, his lips curved into a grin. "But I'm not one to turn down a battle either." Suigetsu observed from the side, his sharp eyes watching Naruto closely. "He killed Orochimaru? 𝐸𝐴𝐵𝐸𝐴. He must be powerful." Naruto's grin widened as he glanced around at the gathering. "Clear out of the arena," he ordered the others, his voice calm, but leaving no room for defiance. One by one, the test subjects, Sound Ninja, backed away, the tension thickening as the arena was cleared, leaving Kimimaro and Naruto standing face to face, the air heavy with the anticipation of the clash to come. "You killed Lord Orochimaru," Kimimaro hissed, his voice cold, like steel being unsheathed. "For that, I will tear you apart." Kimimaro wasted no time. The ground cracked beneath his feet as he lunged forward, closing the distance between them in an instant. His arm shot out, bones erupting from his palm in the form of a blade dance of the camellia. Naruto moved just as fast, his body twisting out of the way with grace. Kimimaro's bone blade missed Naruto by inches. Naruto responded immediately with 𝐵𝐵𝐵, disappearing from Kimimaro's sight, only to reappear behind him. In one smooth motion, Naruto raised his leg high and brought it down with the force of an axe, performing the axe kick. The sheer pressure from the attack created a shockwave that rippled through the arena. Kimimaro, anticipating the move, raised his arm, bones erupting from his forearm to block the powerful strike. The ground beneath him shattered, but he held firm, his eyes narrowing. With a quick counter, he twisted his body into a whirlwind, unleashing Dance of the Willow, sharp bone blades extending from his elbows and knees in a flurry of attacks. Naruto weaved through the barrage of strikes, his speed almost blurring as he sidestepped each blow. With a sudden burst of speed, Naruto executed third stance wedge hook, his body spinning in a three-step combination. The first kick connected with King jaw, the second with his ribs, and the final blow came crashing into his skull from the opposite direction. The force of the attack sent King flying across the arena, his body skidding across the stone floor. King, undeterred, rose to his feet. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth, but his expression remained cold and focused. His bones creaked and shifted beneath his skin, the sound unnatural and haunting. With a flick of his wrist, he drew a bone sword from his arm, his dance of the large technique hardening the bone spikes protruding from his body. "You're fast," King admitted, wiping the blood from his lips. "But speed alone won't be enough." Naruto didn't respond with words. Instead, his smile deepened. In the blink of an eye, he dashed forward, his movements a blur. He delivered a series of rapid wedge hook kicks, each one driving King further back. King blocked and countered, his bone blades clashing against Naruto's strikes, sending sparks flying with each impact. But Naruto wasn't done. Using Dragon Catcher, he slipped beneath King defenses, hooking his leg around King neck. With a powerful leap, Naruto lifted King into the air, spinning him wildly before slamming him headfirst into the ground. The impact created a small crater in the arena floor, dust and debris flying in every direction. King staggered to his feet, blood trickling down his face. His body, however, remained steady, and his eyes burned with cold fury. He slammed his hands into the ground, unleashing his most powerful technique, Dance of the Seedling Fern. A forest of massive bone spikes erupted from the ground, filling the arena with deadly spires of bone. Naruto leapt into the air, narrowly avoiding the bone spikes that shot up from below. As the ground transformed into a lethal field of bone, Naruto hovered above it, his body spinning in midair. He gathered his energy, focusing it into his legs. "Let's see how you handle this," Naruto said, his voice low and dangerous. He unleashed Blue Dragon's kick, his leg cutting through the air like a blade. The force of the kick generated a massive whirlwind that took the form of a blue dragon. The whirlwind collided with the field of bone spikes, shattering them like glass. The sheer power of the attack sent shockwaves through the hideout, causing cracks to run up the stone walls. King, standing amidst the remains of his bone forest, stared at Naruto with grim determination. He raised his arm, bone blades forming once more, but his body was slowing. The illness that ravaged him was catching up, weakening him. Naruto touched down on the ground, his blue eyes gleaming with energy. "You're strong," Naruto said, his tone respectful. "But this is over." King chest heaved as he prepared for one final attack. His bones cracked and shifted, preparing to launch another assault. But Naruto was already moving. He vanished from King sight with 𝐫𝐸 reappearing behind him. Before King could react, Naruto glowed with chakra as he brought it down in a swift arc hand slash, the strike cutting cleanly through the air. King body went rigid as the attack hit him, the force of it overwhelming his already deteriorating form. For a moment, silence hung in the air. King staggered, his bones retracting as he fell to his knees. His vision blurred, the world around him fading. "For Lord Orochimaru," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Naruto watched as King collapsed to the ground, the last remnants of his strength finally giving out. There was no gloating, no celebration. Naruto's expression was calm, almost solemn, as he stood over the fallen warrior. Without turning, Naruto called over to Kabuto, his voice echoing in the hollow chamber. "Kabuto, heal him," Naruto commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. With a quick stride, Kabuto knelt beside King, his hands glowing with a soft green light as he initiated the healing jutsu. The wounds on King body began to close, the torn muscle and shattered bones slowly knitting back together under Kabuto's skillful touch. King eyes fluttered open, his gaze meeting Kabuto's. "Let me die," he murmured, his voice weak but resolute. "I've failed, Lord Orochimaru. If only I had been stronger, if only I wasn't bound by this body." I could have been his perfect vessel. Kabuto smiled down at him, his expression uncharacteristically gentle. You haven't failed him, Kimimaro. You've done more for him than anyone else. But you don't need to keep living for Orochimaru anymore. Find a new reason to live. He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in before adding, if you die, 𝐤𝐢𝐳 will be sad. Kimimaro's body tensed at the mention of 𝐤𝐢𝐳. For the first time in what felt like years, a flicker of warmth stirred in his chest. His mind drifted to the gentle giant who had always looked up to him, who had only ever found peace in his presence. His lips twitched into a faint smile, though his body still ached. Maybe I have something to live for, Kimimaro murmured, his voice barely a whisper. Kabuto finished healing him, standing up with a satisfied nod. Good. Now rest, Kimimaro. You'll need your strength for the journey ahead. Naruto, standing off to the side, observed the exchange with silent approval. He then turned to face the gathered remnants of Orochimaru's forces, the Sound Ninja, the test subjects, and the rest of the stragglers that had stayed behind. Their eyes were filled with uncertainty and fear, and rightfully so. The man who had killed Orochimaru now stood before them, more powerful than any of them could comprehend. You're free to go, Naruto said, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of authority. But know this, if any of you cause trouble, I'll hunt you down. To emphasize his point, Naruto released a surge of his 𝐤𝐢𝐳. His divine power washed over the room like a tidal wave. The air grew heavy, and the pressure made the weaker ones buckle at the knees. The sheer force of Naruto's aura made the walls creak, and every individual in the room shuddered, as though their very souls were being crushed by the weight of his power. It was a clear message. This was not a boy to cross. One by one, they began to retreat, their eyes avoiding Naruto's as they shuffled out of the hideout. Even the more hardened warriors understood the danger they would face if they stepped out of line. Naruto turned to see 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝑡𝑠U approaching, his usual cocky grin plastered on his face, his sharp, shark-like teeth gleaming in the dim light. He stopped a few feet away from Naruto, his hands casually in his pockets as if he were meeting an old friend rather than the man who had just toppled Orochimaru's twisted empire. Well, boss man, 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝑡𝑠U drawled, extending his hand. Gotta say, I'm impressed. Thanks for taking down that snake bastard. He had it coming. Naruto looked at 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝑡𝑠U's outstretched hand and then back at his face, smirking as he reached out to clasp it firmly. Yeah, he did, Naruto said, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of someone who had just changed the course of many lives. 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝑡𝑠U's grin widened as their hands met, and for a brief moment, the tension that had gripped the hideout dissolved. Not bad for a kid from Konoha, 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝑡𝑠U added with a chuckle. Guess I'll have to call you boss man from now on. Naruto released 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝑡𝑠U's hand and crossed his arms, raising an eyebrow. Boss man, huh? You don't seem like the type to take orders from anyone. 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝑡𝑠U laughed, his sharp teeth catching the light. Oh, don't get me wrong. I'm not one for following rules, but I respect strength. And after watching you take out Kimimaro, you've got my attention. Naruto's smirk deepened. Good to know. Kabuto finished healing Kimimaro and stood up. If you're tagging along, 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝑡𝑠U, we got a few more stops to make, Kabuto said. There are other prisoners, other experiments. They need to be freed. 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝑡𝑠U shrugged nonchalantly. Sounds like fun, but his eyes gleamed as he turned to Kabuto. First, I need something from you. Kabuto raised an eyebrow. And what would that be? A sword, 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝑡𝑠U replied, his grin widening into a more predatory smile. I've been itching to get my hands on a decent blade. You know where that bastard kept the good stuff? Don't you? Kabuto glanced at Naruto, who gave a slight nod. Without a word, Kabuto disappeared into the shadows of the hideout, returning a few moments later with a large sword, wrapped in cloth. He tossed it to 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝑡𝑠U, who caught it with ease. Nice, 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝑡𝑠U muttered as he unwrapped the cloth, revealing a sleek blade that gleamed in the low light. This'll do just fine. Naruto watched as 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝑡𝑠U admired the sword, his eyes flickering with amusement. You think that sword's gonna make you stronger? 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝑡𝑠U laughed, his eyes glinting. Nah, boss man, I'm already strong. The sword just makes things more interesting. Naruto uncrossed his arms and turned, motioning for the group to follow him. Let's see how useful you are then. 𝐸𝐸𝐴𝑡𝑠U sheathed the sword across his back, falling in a step beside Naruto. Don't worry, boss man. You won't regret bringing me along. Might even have some fun. Naruto glanced sideways at him, his smirk still in place. Just remember what I said. If you step out of line, I'll hunt you down myself. Zetsu's grin never faltered. I wouldn't have it any other way. Once the others had gone, Naruto turned back to King, who was standing. King, though still recovering, appeared steadier than before. There was a glint of determination in his eyes that hadn't been there during their battle. "Let's go," Naruto said, motioning for them to follow. "There are others trapped in Orochimaru's other hideouts. It's time we set them free." Kabuto nodded, falling in a step behind Naruto. King hesitated for a moment, glancing back. Orochimaru had been his reason for living. But then his thoughts shifted to Yugo, and he turned away from the past. In Takizato, Toby arrived on a delicate mission. His goal, to recruit or control the entity hiding in Kaido's body, 𝐫𝐸𝐺. 𝐫𝐸𝐺 sat under the shade of the trees, sipping sake again. His eyes flickered as he sensed something. A presence. For a split second, it felt tangible before vanishing again. His lips curled into a sly smile. With a soft, almost bored tone, 𝐫𝐸𝐺 muttered, "Come here." Instantly, Toby appeared before him, his orange spiral mask slightly tilted as if he were observing 𝐫𝐸𝐺. Without missing a beat, 𝐫𝐸𝐺's voice rang out coldly, impale. In that instant, dark spears have shot up from the ground, aiming to pierce through Toby. 𝐫𝐸𝐺 chuckled to himself, watching as the spears skewered his target, but the smile quickly faded. The spears phased through Toby as if he wasn't there at all. Toby's masked face tilted to one side in curiosity, and he nonchalantly dropped through the ground, disappearing from sight. A distance away, Toby re-emerged from the shadows, his presence as carefree as ever. 𝐫𝐸𝐺's frown deepened. "Interesting. Certainly more entertaining than those two puppets you sent earlier, Sasori and Deidara. Was it?" Toby responded in his childish, sing-song voice. "Throughout heaven and earth, Toby alone is the honored one," mimicking Gojo's famous phrase with exaggerated enthusiasm. 𝐫𝐸𝐺 chuckled darkly, but his amusement quickly turned to annoyance. Crush! In that moment, the very air around Toby shifted. The gravity became unbearable, collapsing in on itself, creating a massive crater around the masked man. However, despite the overwhelming force, Toby stood there unaffected, as if gravity itself had no hold over him. 𝐫𝐸𝐺's eyes narrowed. Toby giggled beneath his mask. "Oh, was that supposed to hurt? Seems like someone doesn't understand how Toby works. Try harder, creepy merchant." The taunt hung in the air, and for the first time, a flicker of frustration crossed 𝐫𝐸𝐺's features. "Finally," 𝐫𝐸𝐺 hissed, "someone who can entertain me." "Devour," 𝐫𝐸𝐺 commanded. A vortex of black nothingness surrounded Toby, threatening to consume him entirely. Toby, ever the dramatic, gasped loudly and clutched at his mask. "Oh no, the void! Whatever will Toby do?" His voice dripped with playful sarcasm as the void closed in. When the darkness faded, 𝐫𝐸𝐺 grinned, believing his attack to be successful. Toby was nowhere to be found. His smirk broadened as he started a monologue, his voice deep and malicious. "Humans, all so weak, so fragile. They seek power but have no idea what true power is. They are mere insects compared to what I..." From behind, Toby's obnoxious voice interrupted his dark musings. "Boo!" 𝐫𝐸𝐺's eyes widened as he spun around, seeing Toby standing casually a few feet behind him. His tone was irritatingly playful as he continued. "Did you miss me, or did the void eat your brain too?" 𝐫𝐸𝐺's eyes narrowed. This was the power Sasori spoke of. Could this masked fool truly be the one Sasori called a god? The tension in the air thickened, and for a split second, 𝐫𝐸𝐺 considered testing his theory further. But before he could make a move, Toby's Mangekyo Sharingan spun beneath the mask. Their eyes locked. The world around 𝐫𝐸𝐺 shifted violently, the once serene estate dissolving into a twisted, hellish landscape. He stood in a nightmarish version of his own mind, a place of pure darkness, filled with torment and chains. In the center of this darkness, Kaido, the human vessel that 𝐫𝐸𝐺 inhabited, was chained, bound by the weight of his own mind. The merchant struggled weakly, his eyes filled with terror and pain. Toby's voice, no longer playful, echoed in the void, calm and deadly serious. As he gazed upon 𝐫𝐤𝐽's hideous form, "This is the real you." Huh? A parasite leeching off a human soul? But it ends here. 𝐫𝐤𝐽's eyes flicked around, trying to make sense of what was happening, but Toby's Mangekyo had him locked in place. The pressure of the Genjutsu began to build, like a noose tightening around his consciousness. Toby's voice was sharper now, his carefree attitude gone. "You serve me now, 𝐫𝐤𝐽. Your power, your existence, it all belongs to me." Utter annihilation. "You serve me now, 𝐫𝐤𝐽. Your power, your existence, it all belongs to me." Toby, without missing a beat, Toby's Sharingan spun faster, attempting to bind 𝐫𝐤𝐽 to his will. 𝐫𝐤𝐽's fury surged like a tidal wave, and with a sneer curling on his lips, he coldly muttered, "Nullify." In an instant, the nightmarish landscape of the Genjutsu shattered, breaking apart like fragile glass as the two returned to the real world. The weight of 𝐫𝐤𝐽's demonic energy filled the air, oppressive and suffocating, and Toby was forced to retreat. Phasing through the ground, Toby reappeared a safe distance away, his body materializing from the ground as 𝐫𝐤𝐽's aura flared violently. 𝐫𝐤𝐽's eyes glinted with cold amusement, but his patience had run thin. His aura seemed to darken the skies above them, a suffocating presence that made even the air feel like poison. "I'm done playing your little games," he spat with venom, his voice booming through the estate. Raising his voice, he muttered a single word that sent chills down Toby's spine: reform. Kaido's body transformed into 𝐫𝐤𝐽's true demonic form. To Toby's shock, 3 additional mouths appeared on his chest and arms, each snarling and dripping with malice. The aura of raw demonic power amplified, and the earth trembled beneath them. 𝐫𝐤𝐽's smirk widened, each of his mouths twisted in a grotesque smile. He now had the ability to unleash 4 abilities at once, a terrifying thought that sent a bead of sweat trailing down Toby's face, hidden beneath his mask. Toby's body tensed, ready to phase through the ground again if needed, but the chilling truth of 𝐫𝐤𝐽's words echoed in his mind. Nullify intangibility. It wasn't just words. It was a command that made Toby's intangibility useless. His signature technique, the one that had kept him invulnerable for so long, was now useless. Toby's lips tightened under his mask. This would be no ordinary fight. "Impressive," Toby said, his voice deceptively calm, betraying none of the storm swirling inside his thoughts. "But you've underestimated me, 𝐫𝐤𝐽." With his Mangekyo Sharingan spinning, Toby summoned several giant shuriken from his 𝐫𝐞𝐦 dimension, firing them forward with deadly precision. The weapons sliced through the air, spinning with such force that the wind howled in their wake. But 𝐫𝐤𝐽 merely chuckled, one of his mouths muttering the word repel. A shockwave erupted from him, and the shuriken were instantly deflected, sent spiraling harmlessly away. His demonic laughter echoed in the clearing as he raised his voice, dark tendrils surging out from the ground at his command, each one snapping towards Toby like the fangs of a hungry beast. Without hesitation, Toby flickered into motion, disappearing in a blur of speed. The tendrils smashed into the ground where he once stood, leaving deep craters in the earth. But the Uchiha had already reappeared behind 𝐫𝐤𝐽, his hand glowing with the destructive power of a Rasengan. With a sharp movement, Toby drove the Rasengan forward, aiming directly for one of 𝐫𝐤𝐽's grotesque mouths. The energy sphere whirred with destructive power, ready to tear through the demon's body. But just as the Rasengan connected, 𝐫𝐤𝐽's central mouth spoke again. "Nullify." The Rasengan dissipated in an instant, the powerful chakra scattering harmlessly into the air as if it had never existed. Toby's eyes widened beneath his mask, his mind quickly recalculating his next move. But 𝐫𝐤𝐽 was already one step ahead. "Pathetic," 𝐫𝐤𝐽 sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You rely too much on your tricks." 𝐫𝐤𝐽 summoned a massive iron spear from the underworld, the weapon materializing in his hand in the blink of an eye. He thrust the spear forward with monstrous strength, aiming to impale Toby before he could react. Toby barely managed to dodge as the spear stabbed into the ground, splitting the earth open like a cracked skull. The force of the strike sent shockwaves through the air, knocking down trees and sending rubble flying in every direction. Before Toby could regain his footing, 𝐫𝐸𝐽's 3 additional mouths roared in unison, unleashing a barrage of elemental attacks. A wave of flames, a lance of lightning, and a torrent of razor-sharp earth shards hurtled toward Toby all at once, each attack aimed with deadly precision. Toby's 𝐲𝐻𝐼𝐴 spun wildly, calculating the best escape route, but the onslaught was relentless. He teleported in and out of the 𝐾𝐸 dimension rapidly, barely avoiding the barrage. But it was clear 𝐫𝐸𝐽 was pushing him to his limits. No sooner had Toby dodged one attack than another followed, faster, more deadly. Suddenly, Toby felt something seize his ankle. One of 𝐫𝐸𝐽's tendrils had wrapped around his leg with unnerving speed, lifting him into the air and slamming him into the ground with bone-crushing force. Toby grunted as the impact cracked the earth beneath him, but before 𝐫𝐸𝐽 could finish him off, Toby teleported out of the grip, reappearing high in the air. "Not so fast," Toby muttered, forming a series of hand seals. Wood release. Cutting technique. The ground erupted beneath 𝐫𝐸𝐽 as sharp, spear-like wooden branches shot out, aiming for the devil's body. 𝐫𝐸𝐽 was unfazed. Nullify. One of the mouths growled again, and the wooden spears shattered into harmless splinters. 𝐫𝐸𝐽's face twisted into a malicious grin as he raised his hand. "You think you can keep running, little Uchiha?" With a single command, devour. The ground beneath Toby's feet turned black, a swirling void opening up beneath him, ready to consume him whole. Toby's eyes widened as the darkness threatened to pull him in, the gravitational force nearly overwhelming. In a desperate move, Toby activated his 𝐾𝐸𝐽, teleporting just in time to avoid the abyss, reappearing a safe distance away. But the strain of constantly using 𝐾𝐸𝐽 was beginning to show. His chakra reserves were being drained rapidly. Worse still, 𝐫𝐸𝐽's constant use of Nullify made it impossible for Toby to rely on his usual hit-and-run tactics. 𝐫𝐸𝐽 was relentless. "Storm of blades!" he bellowed, and hundreds of swords materialized in the air, all aimed at Toby. They descended like a deadly rain, each blade gleaming with murderous intent. Toby dashed through the rain of steel, weaving between the swords with the precision of a master. But even he couldn't avoid them all. One sword grazed his arm, another slashed across his leg, drawing blood with each cut. Yet, despite the injuries, Toby kept moving, kept thinking. There had to be a way. 𝐫𝐸𝐽 laughed, his voice booming. "You can't win, Uchiha. I control everything here." But Toby wasn't finished yet. He gritted his teeth and formed the necessary hand signs. Fire release. Blast wave wild dance. A massive spiral of fire erupted from Toby's mouth, roaring towards 𝐫𝐸𝐽 with the force of a hurricane, the flames forming a deadly vortex aimed at incinerating the demon. 𝐫𝐸𝐽's central mouth opened wide, sneering. Nullify. The flames vanished as if they had never existed, but Toby was already moving. The fire was a distraction, a decoy for his real attack. 𝐾𝐸𝐽, Toby whispered, reaching into his dimensional pocket and pulling out a weapon, one of the many that he had stored away. It was a giant shuriken, larger than any he had used before. With a calculated throw, Toby hurled the shuriken towards 𝐫𝐸𝐽, his Sharingan locking onto the devil's vital spot. For a moment, everything slowed. The shuriken spun through the air, its deadly arc aimed straight for 𝐫𝐸𝐽's heart. But as the weapon neared its target, 𝐫𝐸𝐽 grinned, his mouth ready to say the words. Toby's shuriken spun through the air, a whirlwind of lethal precision, aimed straight for 𝐫𝐸𝐽's heart. But the moment before it made contact, 𝐫𝐸𝐽's central mouth twisted into a grotesque grin, the word forming on his lips. Nullify. Toby had anticipated this. The second before the shuriken connected, Toby whispered, 𝐾𝐸𝐽. In an instant, the shuriken vanished, sucked into his dimension. 𝐫𝐸𝐽's grin faltered as he realized his counter had been rendered useless. The demon snarled, his multiple mouths twisting in frustration. "You can't escape me forever, Uchiha." His voice boomed, each syllable dripping with fury. Toby wasn't done yet. Before 𝐫𝐸𝐽 could react, the shuriken reappeared, directly behind him, spinning with impossible speed. 𝐫𝐸𝐽's instincts kicked in, and his body twisted unnaturally to avoid the attack. But the razor-sharp edge caught him across one of his grotesque mouths, slicing through flesh with a sickening tear. Blood splattered across the battlefield. "Got you," Toby muttered, his Sharingan gleaming with cold satisfaction. But 𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐝𝐿's laughter echoed across the battlefield, deep and menacing. "Did you really think that was enough?" The devil's body healed almost instantly, his mutilated mouth reforming, the wound sealing with the same dark energy that coursed through his veins. His grin returned, wider and more menacing than before. "You're nothing but an insect, Uchiha." With a roar, 𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐝 summoned an unholy force, the ground beneath him shattering as a tidal wave of dark magic surged toward Toby. The raw, destructive power of the spell was enough to tear the very fabric of reality apart. Toby barely had time to use the body flicker technique, avoiding the brunt of the attack by the thinnest of margins. Toby was breathing hard. The air around them crackled with tension as the two combatants faced off. Toby's mind raced, calculating his next move, but 𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐝 wasn't giving him any time to think. "Dark chain!" 𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐝 bellowed, and from the ground, shadowy chains erupted, wrapping around Toby's body, binding him in place. The more he struggled, the tighter they became, sapping his strength. Toby gritted his teeth, his Sharingan whirling desperately as he tried to find a way out. 𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐝 advanced, his massive form casting a dark shadow over Toby, his eyes gleaming with sadistic glee. "I'll crush you, Uchiha. You should have stayed hidden in the shadows where you belong." 𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐝 summoned another iron spear, this one even larger than before, its jagged edges glinting ominously in the dim light. Without a word, he raised it high above his head, ready to impale Toby and end the fight once and for all. For a split second, Toby considered his options, his Sharingan frantically analyzing every possibility. But as the spear descended, he knew he had only one choice left. The spear pierced through Toby's chest, the sound of metal meeting flesh echoing across the battlefield. Blood splattered the ground as 𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐝 drove the weapon deeper, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. "This is the end for you, Uchiha," he sneered. Toby's vision blurred, the pain searing through his body. His hand twitched, and for a moment, it looked as if he had finally been defeated. In a desperate attempt, Toby sacrificed one of his eyes. "Izanagi," he whispered. In an instant, the world around him warped, reality itself bending to his will. The wound in his chest vanished, the chains binding him disappeared, and the moment 𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐝 had impaled him was erased from existence. Toby stood unharmed, his eye glowing with the power of the Izanagi, but at a terrible cost. 𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐝's grin faltered. "What?" Toby didn't waste a second. With his intangibility still nullified and his chakra running dangerously low, he made his escape. Using the body flicker technique, he teleported far from the battlefield, leaving 𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐝 behind. 𝐤𝐢𝐴𝐺's roar of frustration echoed through the forest, shaking the very earth beneath him. "You can run, Uchiha," he bellowed, his voice filled with rage. "But I will find you, and next time, you won't escape." But Toby was already gone, leaving only the faintest trace of his chakra behind. 𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐝's demonic form trembled with fury, the mouths on his body snarling and growling in unison. He had underestimated his opponent, but the next time they met, Toby wouldn't be so lucky. Far away, Toby reappeared in the shadows of a distant forest, his breath ragged, his body exhausted. The price of using Izanagi had been steep. His Sharingan in his left eye had gone dark, forever lost. But he had survived, and for now, that was enough. Toby leaned against a tree, his thoughts racing as he contemplated his next move. 𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐝 was more powerful than he had anticipated, but the fight wasn't over. He would find a way to defeat the devil, even if it meant pushing himself to the brink. As the wind rustled through the trees, Toby's lone Sharingan gleamed with cold determination. "This isn't over, 𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐝. Not by a long shot." Without turning his head, he already knew who it was. 𝐤𝐳 materialized beside him, their ever-watchful eyes having witnessed the entirety of the clash. White Zetsu was the first to speak, a mocking grin plastered across his face. "Well, that was something else," he chuckled, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. "Nagato and Conan are going to love hearing about this. They warned you? Told you not to mess with 𝐤𝐢𝐧𝐝, not to underestimate him. but you just had to do things your way. Toby remained silent, his Sharingan fixated on the ground. Black Zetsu, ever more serious, spoke in a low, calm voice. 𝐫𝐤𝐳 is powerful, but he's also arrogant. You managed to survive this time. Next time, we'll need a different approach. White Zetsu snickered. Different approach? I'm more curious how you plan to explain this one. Hey, Nagato Koning, guess what? I almost got killed by a demon, but hey, at least I still have one eye left. Toby's eye narrowed slightly, though he said nothing. He was already formulating his next move, knowing full well that his plans couldn't afford another setback. 𝐫𝐤𝐳 had been a dangerous opponent, but Toby wasn't one to give up so easily. He would regroup, re-strategize, and come back stronger. Let's go, Toby finally muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Without another word, the three of them vanished. Return to the Land of Waves. 16. Return to the Land of Waves. Council meeting and the tense encounter at the northern hideout. After their exploits at Orochimaru's main hideout, Naruto, Kabuto along with Kimimaro and Sujitsu headed towards Orochimaru's southern hideout, located off the coast of the Land of Waves. The journey took them back to the place where Naruto had experienced his first real mission, a mission that held bittersweet memories of hardship, battle, and newfound friendships. Naruto and his companions finally docked at the harbor, the familiar sight of the peaceful village greeting them. The village had changed since his last visit. The atmosphere was lighter, the people more cheerful, and the shadows of poverty and fear that once loomed large had faded away. As Naruto walked through the village streets, he was greeted with warm smiles and waves. Men and women called out his name, their voices filled with admiration and gratitude. Small children ran up to him, eager to see the man they had heard countless stories about, the hero who saved them from despair. Naruto, one villager called, bowing respectfully. "Thank you for everything you've done for us," another added with a bright smile. Naruto, and used to the adulation, sheepishly rubbed the back of his head. "Come on, guys, it's not a big deal. I was just doing my job," he said, embarrassed but happy to see that the people of the Land of Waves had recovered and were thriving. Sujitsu, walking beside Naruto, glanced around the village with a smirk. "Damn, boss. Seems like you're a legend around here." His tone was teasing, but the underlying respect was clear. Naruto chuckled softly, still rubbing his head. "I guess so." Naruto and his group soon reached Tizuna's house, where they saw the old man and his grandson, Inari, fishing by the river. The peaceful sight warmed Naruto's heart, a far cry from the frightened and helpless child Inari once was. Inari, noticing Naruto from a distance, dropped his fishing rod and sprinted towards him. "Ni-chan," he yelled, jumping into Naruto's arms. Naruto caught him effortlessly, a wide grin spreading across his face. "Told you I'd come back, didn't I?" he said, ruffling Inari's hair. Inari looked up at him with shining eyes. "You're really back. I knew you'd keep your word." Tsunami soon joined them, carrying a tray with lunch for Tizuna and Inari. She smiled warmly at Naruto, wiping her hands on her apron. "Naruto, it's so good to see you again. We weren't expecting visitors." Tizuna also approached, his face crinkled in a pleased grin. "Well, if it isn't the kid who saved our hides. You've grown, Naruto." Naruto greeted them both with a respectful nod, glad to be among old friends. "Yeah, it's been a while, huh? I'm just glad to see you all doing well." They shared a moment of quiet happiness, surrounded by the tranquil sounds of the river and the village. The hardships of the past felt like distant memories now, replaced by the warmth of friendship and peace. Sujitsu, observing the scene with confusion, muttered to Kabuto, "Who are these people?" Kabuto adjusted his glasses, replying coolly, "The family Naruto helped during one of his early missions. Tizuna is a bridge builder. This village was once oppressed by a tyrant named Gato, and Naruto played a significant role in their liberation." Sujitsu shrugged, still unimpressed. "Well, good for them, I guess." Kimimaro stood silently, watching the interactions but saying nothing, his mind focused elsewhere. Naruto's carefree demeanor with the villagers was in stark contrast to the powerful warrior he had fought just days before. Naruto, after chatting for a while, turned to his companions. "Come on, let's grab some food. I'm sure Tsunami's cooking will blow your minds." The group moved toward the house, where they would take a momentary rest before continuing their journey. After a heartfelt lunch with Tizuna's family, Naruto stood by the door, looking out at the peaceful village. He smiled softly, appreciating the tranquility for a moment longer before turning back to his friends. "It's time to go," Naruto said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. He gave a final wave to Tizuna, Tsunami, and Inari, who stood by the doorway, watching them with warm smiles. "Take care, Naruto," Tizuna called out, his rough voice full of gratitude. "You're always welcome here." Inari beamed, his voice full of admiration. "Come back soon, and Ai-chan." Naruto gave them a thumbs up, then turned away, leading Kabuto, Kimimaro, and Suigetsu through the village. His thoughts, however, drifted toward another destination. "Next stop, Zabuza and Haku," Naruto muttered to himself. The walk to the graves was quiet, the only sounds being the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional whisper of the wind. As they neared the spot, Suigetsu's gaze suddenly sharpened. His eyes widened as he spotted something familiar. "No way," Suigetsu murmured, his voice filled with disbelief. "Is that?" Before him stood Zabuza's massive sword, the 𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐽, planted firmly into the earth, marking the final resting place of the demon of the mist and his loyal companion, Haku. "Why the hell is my senpai's sword just being used as a gravestone?" Suigetsu demanded, turning to the group, his expression a mix of confusion and indignation. Kabuto, ever the collected one, adjusted his glasses with a small smirk. "Because Zabuza is dead," he replied matter-of-factly. "He and Haku both lie beneath this earth, together in death, as they were in life." Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly at Kabuto, a flicker of suspicion crossing his mind. "Right? Kabuto always knows more than he lets on," Naruto thought, remembering that Kabuto was a master of gathering information. Suigetsu, however, didn't care for the subtleties of the conversation. His eyes locked onto the blade as he strode forward with purpose. He grinned, almost reverently, as he placed his hand on the hilt of the 𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐽. "Senpai," Suigetsu said softly, almost as if addressing Zabuza himself. "I'm taking this. I'll wield it better than anyone else, and I'll make sure it gets used to its full potential." Naruto's brow twitched. As much as Suigetsu's casual arrogance bothered him, Naruto couldn't deny that Zabuza had earned his respect in those final moments of battle all those years ago. The idea of someone else wielding his blade felt wrong. Just as Naruto was about to say something, a deep, familiar voice cut through the air. "It's yours now, Brad." Everyone froze. Slowly, they turned toward the source of the voice. Before them, shimmering in the pale light, stood the spirit forms of Zabuza, Momochi, and Haku. The spectral figures looked as real as they did in life, though slightly translucent. Zabuza's piercing gaze rested on Suigetsu, his arms crossed over his chest as he smirked. "Do what you want with it. It's just a tool. How you use it is what matters." Suigetsu, grinning wide, nodded at his fallen senpai. "Thanks, Zabuza-senpai. I won't let you down." Haku, who stood beside Zabuza with a serene smile, turned his gentle gaze to Naruto. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of his emotions. "Naruto," he began, his voice like a breeze, "I am grateful to have met you. You showed me that people can change, even Zabuza." He smiled wider. "Thank you for that." Naruto felt a lump in his throat, memories of their encounters flashing through his mind. He nodded solemnly. "Haku, Zabuza, I won't forget either of you." Zabuza grunted, his harsh voice softer than usual. "Naruto, don't ever change, no matter how tough things get. And don't die anytime soon. You're one of the few who understands what it means to fight for something real." Naruto clenched his fists, his heart heavy yet full of respect. "I won't." As Zabuza's and Haku's spirits began to fade, Suigetsu suddenly stepped forward, his tone more serious than usual. "Hey, senpai," he called out, catching the fading demon's attention. "If you see my brother, tell him this for me. I'll obtain all 7 swords and surpass him. I'll become the strongest of the 7 swordsmen." Zabuza chuckled, his deep laughter resonating in the air. "If I run into Mangetsu, I'll be sure to pass on the message, Brad." And with that, Zabuza and Haku's spirits disappeared, leaving only the wind and the faint rustling of leaves behind. The group stood in silence for a moment longer, paying their respects to the fallen warriors. Afterward, they turned and continued on their journey, advancing toward the southern hideout. The towering structure loomed in the distance as they approached, its cold exterior reflecting the ominous atmosphere of Orochimaru's former territory. As they neared, a figure was already waiting for them, her red hair unmistakable even from afar. "Karen," Kabuto murmured with a knowing smile. It seemed she sensed our chakra long before we arrived. As they approached, Karen's eyes widened in recognition. She glanced over the group, her gaze lingering on Kabuto, Kimimaro, and Suigetsu. Her sharp eyes then turned toward Kabuto, full of suspicion. "What do you want, Kabuto?" she asked bluntly, crossing her arms. Before he could answer, Kabuto gestured to Naruto. "First, introductions. Karen, this is Naruto Uzumaki." Karen's eyes widened further, her jaw nearly dropping when she heard Naruto's name. "Uzumaki?" she stammered, shock clear in her voice. "You're an Uzumaki?" Kabuto chuckled softly at her reaction. "Indeed. You two are distant relatives." Naruto raised an eyebrow, intrigued but not entirely surprised. He'd heard of the scattered remnants of his clan. After the introductions, Kabuto filled Karen in on Orochimaru's demise. Her reaction was instantaneous. Relief washed over her face, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to relax. "So he's finally gone," Karen whispered, her tone a mixture of disbelief and liberation. "I'm free." With Orochimaru's end, Karen no longer had to remain as the warden of the southern hideout. The prisoners, long held captive under Orochimaru's twisted experiments, were released. However, as they departed, Naruto's divine presence flared, and his stern voice rang out. "If any of you cause trouble, I'll hunt you down personally." The sheer force of his words, coupled with his overwhelming aura, caused the former prisoners to quake in fear, bowing in submission before scattering into the wilds. Karen, witnessing Naruto's power firsthand, stood frozen in awe. She had never felt such divine strength radiate from a single person. As the group began to leave the southern hideout, Karen walked beside Naruto, curiosity piqued. They began to talk, getting to know each other better, with Karen asking about his abilities and heritage. Meanwhile, Suigetsu, ever the mischief maker, did his best to annoy Karen, poking fun at her and attempting to get under her skin. Karen scowled, her patience wearing thin. "Will you shut up already, Suigetsu?" Suigetsu only grinned wider. "Make me." Naruto, chuckling at their antics, shook his head. For all the chaos surrounding their mission, moments like these felt strangely normal. Jiraiya and his group arrived at gates of Konoha. Standing guard were Izumo and Kotetsu, who straightened up upon seeing the famous Sannin arrive. Their initial smiles turned into expressions of curiosity and concern. "Where's Naruto?" Izumo asked, peering behind Jiraiya as if expecting to see the young blonde trailing behind him. Jiraiya flashed a knowing grin, shaking his head. "Naruto's on a mission," he said, his tone casual yet layered with meaning. "He's currently freeing Orochimaru's test subjects." At the mention of Orochimaru, both Izumo and Kotetsu froze. Izumo's eyes widened in disbelief, and Kotetsu stepped forward, his voice tinged with worry. "Is it really okay to let Naruto go off on something that dangerous? Alone?" Jiraiya chuckled, dismissing the concern with a wave of his hand. "Trust me, kid, that boy can handle himself better than most grown men in this village. I'd be more worried about anyone who tries to get in his way." Both guards shared a nervous glance, but nodded, not questioning the legendary Toad Sage any further. As the trio made their way past, a feeling of anticipation hung in the air, a calm before the inevitable storm that awaited Konoha. Later that afternoon, the council convened. The large room filled with tension as the elders and clan heads, Chozo Akimichi, Shibi Aburame, Hayashi Hyuga, Shikaka Nara, Inoichi Yamanaka, and some Inuzuka gathered. Tsunade, Shizune, and Jiraiya sat at the forefront. Koharu began the meeting. "We are gathered here today to announce that Tsunade Senju will officially assume the role of the 5th Hokage." The clan heads nodded in approval, but Danzo's face remained stoic, though beneath the surface, his displeasure simmered. His grip tightened on the armrest of his chair as thoughts of Tsunade's incompetence filled his mind. This position should have been mine. He didn't believe in Tsunade's strength or resolve to lead. As the discussion progressed, the topic shifted to Konoha's pressing issues. The destruction caused by Orochimaru's invasion, the betrayal of their former allies in the Sand Village, and the steps needed for rebuilding the village. "We need to rebuild quickly," Choza stated firmly. "Our infrastructure has taken a significant hit." Shikaku, ever the strategist, rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "We also need to tread carefully with the Sand Village. Their betrayal may have cost us, but outright retaliation could lead to a larger conflict that we're not prepared for." Inoichi added, "We should open diplomatic talks, but proceed with caution. We can't afford to look weak." Tsunade remained silent, listening closely, but her mind was already focused on how to approach these challenges once she took office. The weight of becoming Hokage was looming, but she would carry it for Konoha and for the memory of her lost loved ones. The discussion turned to the date for Tsunade's official inauguration. While the logistics were hashed out, Danzo's mind was elsewhere, plotting and scheming in the shadows, just as he always had. Meanwhile, far from Konoha, Naruto and his team had finally reached their destination, the northern hideout where the infamous Yugo was kept. The hideout was eerily quiet as they moved through the dark corridors, freeing the test subjects and prisoners as they went. One by one, the captives stumbled out, gazing warily at their liberators. Like at the southern hideout, they were given a clear warning: cause trouble, and Naruto would be there to deal with them. At last, they reached Yugo's cell. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the sight before him. The boy was chained up, nodding his head back and forth repeatedly. His body trembled violently, barely containing the monstrous urges within him. Kimimaro, seeing his friend's torment, stepped forward. "Yugo," Kimimaro called out softly, his voice calm and composed. "It's me." Yugo's head snapped up at the familiar voice, his eyes wide with recognition. "Kimimaro?" His voice was weak, filled with a mixture of relief and confusion. But before the moment could last, a dark, sadistic smile spread across Yugo's face as the curse within him took over. He broke out of his restraints. With a roar, his arm grotesquely morphed into a massive axe-like appendage. The force of his axe shattered his cell. The boy began spouting vicious, bloodthirsty ramblings. Kimimaro stepped forward. Kabuto stepped back, eyeing the situation with cold calculation. "Kimimaro, don't overdo it. Let us handle him." But Kimimaro ignored the warning, his resolve unshaken. "Yugo is my responsibility." Karen, meanwhile, frantically shook her head, inching away from the chaos. "There's no way I'm getting involved in a fight with him. He's insane." Suigetsu laughed, clearly amused by Karen's fear. "Typical. You're all talk when it comes to being tough." He brandished his newly acquired sword, Kubikurabocho, with a grin that mirrored Yugo's madness. "Guess it's my turn to play." Yugo's wild eyes locked onto Suigetsu, recognizing the challenge. His smirk widened, filled with malevolent glee. "Come then," Yugo hissed, his voice low and filled with sadistic excitement. "Let's see how long you can survive." The battle was about to begin, and though Yugo was powerful, Suigetsu, with Zabuza's blade in hand, wasn't one to back down from a fight. As the tension in the air mounted, Naruto silently observed, his eyes watching the confrontation unfold. "This is going to get messy," he thought, mentally preparing for whatever would come next. Berserker's wrath, Council's reckoning. Yugo let out a twisted laugh, his axe arm flexing as he shot towards Suigetsu without hesitation, swinging with monstrous strength. Suigetsu dodged with ease, his liquid body reforming after each attempt Yugo made to slice him apart. "Not bad, Yugo," Suigetsu taunted, spinning Zabuza's massive sword with ease. "But you're gonna need more than that if you want to keep up with me." Yugo's rage seemed to fuel him further. His body transformed again, his right arm mutating into a giant piston-like appendage, and he slammed it into the ground, cracking the stone beneath them. The force sent shockwaves through the hideout, throwing debris everywhere. Suigetsu's body rippled with water-like fluidity, dodging the debris and staying one step ahead of Yugo's crazed attacks. Kimimaro, watching intently, clenched his fists. "Yugo, calm yourself. This isn't what you want." But Yugo was long past listening. His body continued to transform in horrifying ways as his bloodlust took over. "Kill, kill." "Kill," he roared. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 took a deep breath and cracked his neck. "Fine, if you won't settle down, I'll put you down." He raised 𝐫𝐸𝐺's sword and swung it toward 𝐤𝐢𝐳 with full force. However, 𝐤𝐢𝐳's rage-fueled power was too great to be easily subdued. With his enhanced speed, he blocked the blade with his mutated arm, the clang of steel against flesh resonating through the room. His strength was monstrous, and despite 𝐤𝐢𝐳's skill, 𝐤𝐢𝐳 was proving to be a formidable opponent. 𝐤𝐢𝐳's piston arm charged up, and with a powerful blast, he struck 𝐤𝐢𝐳. 𝐤𝐢𝐳's body momentarily exploded into a cloud of water, splattering across the floor before reforming behind 𝐤𝐢𝐳. "Water Logia, remember?" 𝐤𝐢𝐳 grinned mockingly, his form quickly solidifying. "You can't beat what you can't hit." 𝐤𝐢𝐳 didn't care for the banter. With a roar of rage, his body transformed even further. He rushed at 𝐤𝐢𝐳 with terrifying speed, swinging both mutated limbs in rapid succession. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 was unaffected by the attacks. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 snarled, eyes wild. His hand extended into a massive blade-like appendage, aiming to carve 𝐤𝐢𝐳 in half. But 𝐤𝐢𝐳, moving faster than he seemed capable with such a large sword, parried the attack with 𝐫𝐸𝐺's blade. The force of their clash sent a gust of wind through the hideout, shaking the walls. Kimimaro watched, his expression strained. "𝐤𝐢𝐳, please stop this madness." 𝐤𝐢𝐳's only response was a sadistic laugh as he swung his axe arm down once again. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 barely managed to parry the blow with 𝐫𝐸𝐺's sword, the impact sending a jolt up his arms. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he struggled to hold his ground. "Damn, you are strong," 𝐤𝐳 admitted, gritting his teeth as 𝐤𝐢𝐳 pressed the attack. "But I'm not going down that easy." 𝐤𝐢𝐳 snarled, his eyes gleaming with madness. His body shifted again, his arms transforming into massive cannons. He charged up, and with a deafening roar, fired a barrage of blasts that tore through the hideout. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 leaped into the air, dodging the blasts, but the sheer force of the explosion sent him tumbling through the air, slamming into the far wall. "You're crazy, 𝐤𝐢𝐳," 𝐤𝐢𝐳 growled, pulling himself to his feet. He spat blood but grinned nonetheless. "But I like crazy." He swung 𝐫𝐸𝐺's blade with newfound ferocity, meeting 𝐤𝐢𝐳's relentless attacks head-on. The two clashed again and again. Despite 𝐤𝐢𝐳's water-based abilities, 𝐤𝐢𝐳's overwhelming strength and unpredictability kept him on the defensive. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 lunged forward, his body contorting as he aimed a devastating punch at 𝐤𝐢𝐳's chest. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 barely managed to dodge, the force of the blow sending a gust of wind rushing past him. He countered with a powerful slash of 𝐫𝐸𝐺's blade, aiming for 𝐤𝐢𝐳's torso, but the Berserker's mutated arm blocked the strike again, the blade barely biting into his flesh. Kabuto, watching the battle unfold, narrowed his eyes. 𝐤𝐢𝐳's strength is extraordinary. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 can't keep this up much longer. Karen frantically shook her head, watching in horror. "There's no reasoning with 𝐤𝐢𝐳 when he's like this. He'll kill 𝐤𝐢𝐳 if we don't do something." Kimimaro took a step forward, his voice calm yet firm. "I will stop him." But before Kimimaro could move, Naruto, who had remained silent until now, stepped in. "No," he said, his voice carrying an undeniable weight. "Let me handle this." 𝐤𝐢𝐳, breathing heavily, glanced back at Naruto. "You sure about that? This guy's insane." As Naruto strode confidently toward 𝐤𝐢𝐳, a smirk danced across his face, his blue eyes glinting with mischief. He had seen enough of the fight to know exactly how this was going to go down. 𝐤𝐢𝐳, with all his monstrous strength and berserk fury, was about to meet a force far beyond anything he could handle. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 snarled, his body trembling with the violent energy coursing through him. His mutated arms pulsed, shifting into jagged blades of raw, destructive power. He growled, "I'll tear you apart." Naruto's grin widened. "You can try." In a flash, Naruto disappeared from sight, leaving behind only a gust of wind. 𝐤𝐢𝐳's eyes widened as he frantically looked around, trying to track Naruto's movements. Before he could react, Naruto appeared directly behind him, delivering a powerful spinning top kick to the side of 𝐤𝐢𝐳's head. The impact sent 𝐤𝐢𝐳 stumbling forward, his massive frame struggling to regain balance. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 roared in frustration, swinging his mutated arm wildly, but Naruto had already vanished again. He appeared in front of 𝐤𝐢𝐳 this time, his leg whipping through the air with lightning speed as he delivered a wedge hook directly to 𝐤𝐢𝐳's torso. The kick landed with a thunderous crack, forcing 𝐤𝐢𝐳 back several steps, the force enough to shake the ground beneath them. "Come on, 𝐤𝐢𝐳," Naruto teased, his body vibrating with the energy of a born fighter. "Is that all you've got? I thought you were supposed to be the dangerous one." 𝐤𝐢𝐳, his face contorting with rage, let out an animalistic roar. His arm morphed again. Without hesitation, he fired off a barrage of chakra blasts that ripped through the air, each one strong enough to level a building. But Naruto was already on the move. His supernatural speed allowed him to effortlessly dodge the incoming blasts, weaving between them like they were nothing. In the blink of an eye, he was directly in front of 𝐤𝐢𝐳, his fist raised. "Basaltic fist," Naruto shouted, driving his fist into 𝐤𝐢𝐳's chest with crushing force. The impact sent shockwaves through 𝐤𝐢𝐳's body, his ribcage shuddering from the sheer power behind the strike. Before 𝐤𝐢𝐳 could even react, Naruto followed up with a swift Brazilian kick, his leg arching upward and slamming into 𝐤𝐢𝐳's jaw with devastating precision. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 was thrown back, crashing into the stone walls of the hideout with enough force to leave cracks behind. He groaned, his body twitching from the overwhelming pain. But the berserker's rage refused to die down. He slowly rose to his feet, his eyes burning with fury. "You're gonna regret that," 𝐤𝐢𝐳 growled, his body starting to shift once more. His body grew multiple jet booster-like appendages, multiple Lotus non-self connected cannons. With a roar, 𝐤𝐢𝐳 fired off a relentless barrage of energy blasts. The sheer number and speed of the blasts were enough to overwhelm any normal opponent. The air itself seemed to burn from the raw destructive force being unleashed. Naruto, however, stood his ground. He didn't flinch, didn't waver. Instead, he calmly raised one foot, his eyes gleaming with a playful yet dangerous light. "Looks like I'll have to show you what real power looks like." The moment the first blast was about to hit, Naruto moved. His legs snapped forward with blinding speed, cutting through the air like a whip. 𝐻𝐸 original. 𝐸𝐸 kick. The force of Naruto's kick collided with the incoming barrage, the sheer power of it sending a shockwave through the hideout. The air crackled as the blasts were shattered one by one, each one dissipating against the overwhelming strength of Naruto's technique. The final wave of energy was obliterated as Naruto's kick struck the ground, creating a crater beneath him. 𝐤𝐢𝐳, having witnessed his most powerful attack completely neutralized, staggered back, his body trembling. The rage in his eyes flickered, replaced with shock and disbelief. Naruto stood tall, a smirk still on his face as he lowered his leg. "That was me going easy on you. If you want to keep this up, you're only going to get hurt." 𝐤𝐢𝐳, panting heavily, fell to his knees, his body reverting back to its normal form. He stared up at Naruto, his chest heaving with exhaustion. The madness that had consumed him was gone, replaced by a deep sense of awe. I lost," 𝐤𝐢𝐳 muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Naruto stepped forward, offering a hand to the defeated berserker. "You don't have to be a monster, 𝐤𝐢𝐳. You've got people who care about you, people like Kimimaro. Let them help you." 𝐤𝐢𝐳 looked up at Naruto, his expression filled with uncertainty. After a moment, he hesitantly reached out and took Naruto's hand. "I don't want to hurt anyone anymore." Naruto smiled warmly, pulling 𝐤𝐢𝐳 to his feet. "Then let's make sure that never happens again." With the battle over, the tension in the hideout finally dissipated. Kabuto, Suigetsu, Kimimaro, and Karen watched as Naruto and 𝐤𝐢𝐳 stood together, the conflict between them now resolved. Though the scars of battle remained, it was clear that 𝐤𝐢𝐳 had found a new path, one where he didn't have to face his demons alone. As they all prepared to leave the hideout, Suigetsu grumbled, rubbing the side of his face. "You know, I almost had him before you stepped in, boss." Naruto chuckled, glancing back at Suigetsu. Sure. Whatever helps you sleep at night." Naruto and his companions pressed on with their journey, the path ahead shrouded in both uncertainty and danger. In Konoha council meeting, the air in the council chambers was thick with tension as 𝐫𝐞𝐸 of 𝐸𝐸𝐵 stood before the elders, Tsunade, and the assembled clan heads. His face was composed, but the weight of his village's decisions bore down on him like an invisible burden. Bowing deeply, he he began his solemn apology. 𝐸𝐴𝐴𝐻 has been facing severe financial difficulties for some time. Baki began, his voice firm, yet laced with remorse. Our Wind Daimyo, in an attempt to reduce costs, began outsourcing missions to 𝐸𝐴𝐴𝐻, finding it more affordable than relying on our own shinobi. This decision deprived us of crucial funds needed to maintain our village's strength. A heavy silence hung over the room as Baki let the weight of his words settle in. The implications were clear. 𝐸𝐴𝐴𝐻 had been slowly suffocating, a shadow of its former self. We resorted to desperate measures, trading gold, developing new jutsu, but none of it was enough to keep our village afloat. Out of sheer desperation, we turned to an alliance with Odo 𝐴𝐻, believing it to be our only means of survival. His eyes swept over the council, seeking understanding, though he knew it was a thin hope. Tsunade's stern gaze softened slightly, though the shadow of disappointment lingered in her eyes. Across the room, Tsum stood with her arms crossed, her face a mix of stern reproach and careful contemplation. Shikaku, ever the strategist, nodded slowly, as if weighing the impossible situation 𝐸𝐴𝐴𝐻 had found itself in. Hayashi's expression remained sharp but not without empathy, his understanding of the delicate balance between necessity and loyalty apparent. We understand the damage our actions have caused, Baki continued, his tone heavy with regret. The lives lost, the trust broken. For that, we offer our deepest apologies. Our actions were born of desperation, but that does not excuse our betrayal of our allies. A murmur rippled through the council. The elders, while deeply critical of the betrayal, could not ignore the harsh realities that had pushed the sand to such measures. Danzo spoke first, his tone as cold as ice. Stupidity cannot be forgiven easily. You betrayed Konoha. You weakened yourself. In war, both are fatal mistakes. Koharu noted Konoha's mistake. Yuzashio trusted us too once. And where are they now? Destroyed, because we were not there to help them. Her words hung in the air like a blade poised to strike. At the mention of Yuzashio, Tsunade's expression tightened. Her fists clenched as the painful memory of her grandmother's lost home washed over her. After a pause, Koharu spoke again, her voice a shade more forgiving. We've deliberated on this matter, and while your betrayal is inexcusable, we are prepared to overlook it. However, reparations must be made. 𝐸𝐴𝐴𝐻 will compensate Konoha for the damages caused. On top of that, we expect full cooperation from 𝐸𝐴𝐴𝐻 in future endeavors. Hamura chimed in, his tone more measured. We will also be in direct talks with the Wind Daimyo regarding the mission outsourcing. His actions destabilized the balance between our nations. Baki bowed deeply, his heart heavy with both gratitude and shame. Thank you, Honorable Council, for your mercy. 𝐸𝐴𝐴𝐻 will fulfill its obligations. Tsunade's inauguration. In the days that followed, Konoha erupted with excitement as the villagers gathered to witness Tsunade's inauguration as the 5th Hokage. The streets buzzed with life, the weight of the recent conflict momentarily forgotten as hope flickered anew in the hearts of the people. Children ran through the streets, laughing and playing, while merchants shouted in celebration. Everywhere one looked, there was a sense of optimism, belief that with Tsunade in charge, Konoha would rise stronger than ever. As Tsunade stood before her village, the cheers that erupted were deafening. The villagers' faith in her was palpable, their voices raised in joyous unity. Yet, despite the smiles and celebrations, Tsunade's mind wandered to one particular godly ninja, Naruto, a village on the edge. In the days following her inauguration, the burden of leadership began to weigh heavily on Tsunade's shoulders. Konoha was stretched thin, its ninjas scattered on various missions, while others remained behind to help rebuild the war-torn village. The strain of overseeing it all was maddening. Sitting in the Hokage's office, surrounded by an endless sea of paperwork, Tsunade cursed under her breath. Damn that Naruto, she muttered under her breath, recalling their bet and the subsequent fight that had left her humiliated and him victorious. I hope he's enjoying himself wherever he is, because I sure as hell am not. 𝐳𝐲 Far from the hustle of Konoha, 𝐳𝐲 arrived in 𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐿, his steps as sure and confident as ever. His business relationship with the 𝐤𝐢𝐳 had always been solid, and today would be no different, or so it seemed. 𝐤𝐢𝐳 requested a private audience with I, and once 𝐤𝐢𝐳, and the 𝐸𝐵 had left the room, the true nature of his visit was revealed. With a dark gleam in his eye, 𝐤𝐢𝐳 activated his word soul magic, bending ice with a single whispered command. "Attack Konoha," 𝐤𝐢𝐳 murmured, his voice laced with malevolent magic. "They are weak, and now is the time to claim what you desire." The 𝐤𝐽𝐳's eyes darkened as 𝐤𝐢𝐳's magic took hold. The idea of finally obtaining the 𝐫𝐞𝐽, the long-sought prize, festered in his mind. After the suggestion had been firmly planted, they continued to discuss business, as if nothing sinister had just transpired. When 𝐤𝐢𝐳 left, 𝐤𝐢𝐳 and 𝐫𝐿 returned to the 𝐤𝐽𝐳's office. His voice brimming with dark anticipation, delivered his orders. "We will attack Konoha," he declared with a laugh that sent shivers down their spines. "And this time, we will get our hands on the 𝐫𝐞𝐽, once and for all. 𝐤𝐽𝐳-sama, attacking Konoha is this wise." 𝐤𝐢𝐳's laughter was deep and foreboding. "Konoha's weak, and I've had enough of playing politics. Prepare the forces. It's time we take what's rightfully ours." Later, 𝐤𝐢𝐳 in 𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐽. Next, 𝐤𝐢𝐳 made his way to 𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐽. The 𝐶𝐢𝐼𝐾𝐽, 𝐸𝐿𝐾𝐬, was far less welcoming than the 𝐤𝐽𝐳, his suspicion evident as soon as 𝐤𝐢𝐳 entered the office. "State your business, Kaido," 𝐸𝐿𝐾𝐬 demanded, his eyes narrowed. 𝐤𝐢𝐳, unbothered by the frosty reception, smiled smoothly. "I'm here to make amends for the trouble I've caused your village." 𝐸𝐿𝐾𝐬 raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. "And how do you plan to make up for everything?" 𝐤𝐢𝐳 gestured for 𝐸𝐿𝐾𝐬's subordinates to leave the room. Once they were gone, the dark mage once again wove his words soul magic, implanting a suggestion deep into 𝐸𝐿𝐾𝐬's mind. "Attack 𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐽." With the deed done, 𝐤𝐢𝐳 handed over a hefty sum of money, his grin widening as 𝐸𝐿𝐾𝐬 smirked in return. "I look forward to a prosperous relationship," the 𝐶𝐢𝐾𝐽 said, his tone greedy. "As do I," 𝐤𝐢𝐳 replied, his voice oozing satisfaction. With both I and 𝐸𝐿𝐾𝐬 now under his thrall, the seeds of war had been carefully planted. And as they took root, 𝐤𝐢𝐳 couldn't help but smile, a dark, twisted grin. The chaos that was to come would be delicious, and he would relish every moment of it. I hope you guys liked the story. If you did, click on any of the videos which are popping on the screen right now. I promise you'll love them too. If you like my videos, you can like and subscribe too. I'll see you on another amazing What If video, guys. Love you all. Peace.